Well, hello and welcome back. This is Inner Work with MaryAnn Walker, where I help recovering people pleasers identify the roles that are holding them back. And as part of that, I want to welcome Elle Boone to the show. So, welcome, Elle. So happy to have
Thank
you.
thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm very, very excited to have this conversation with you today, Marianne. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and Elle
Yeah.
is launching a brand new podcast that really works with a very specific role that holds a lot of people back. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So the title of the show, which will launch somewhere between the middle of the end of October, is
Hmm.
titled The Family Scapegoat Chronicles. And the name, Family Scapegoat, would indicate that the host is probably from that tribe of family scapegoats. So, yes, I have a lot of experience on that topic. And I wanted to create something that didn't exist when I figured out that I was the family scapegoat and all the
Mm.
dynamics that would allow people not just to learn more about it, but also to come on the show and express their feelings about it and share their story so
Yeah.
that others can be heard and seen and validated and find community as well. So
Yeah.
I'm
What a
excited
beautiful
about that.
resource.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hope that many come and get benefit and value out of it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for those that are unfamiliar with the term scapegoat, can you tell us a bit about what that looks like, especially in a family dynamic?
Yes. Yes. So typically in a family dynamic, I want to preface it by saying a dysfunctional family dynamic
Mhm.
because it is. It's very much a dysfunction. And the scapegoat role is one that is assigned to a child within a family system. And it can be out of a dysfunctional family system, a narcissistic family system, or a combination of the two,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. One person is singled out to carry the blame and the shame of the family, and not just the current generation, but previous generations as well. It's passed down a little bit like China, you
Hmm.
know, family heirloom. And so the dysfunction of the family is projected on the family scapegoat,
Mhm.
and that person is carrying the wounds of the family, so that the people who are doing the projection don't have to deal with the issues.
That just sounds like such a huge burden. I mean, to carry the blame and the shame of the family.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like? I'm sure it's probably something that's harder to identify when you're the one being scapegoated.
Yeah, the one thing that comes to mind in terms of blame, because there are
Mhm.
three components that are really important. There's blame, shame, and rejection. So the
Mm.
blame might look like everything is your fault in the family dynamic. I used to say before I started to figure this out, I was living in New York when 9/11 happened. And I used to
Mhm.
joke that it was my fault. My family blamed me for that because I was living there. So,
Mm.
all jokes aside, the blame and the shame coupled with the rejection can really wear down the scapegoat, which is the point. If
Mm.
the scapegoat is contained, minimized, reduced, then they're not so much of a threat as they are if they are free to be the truth teller that they are. And I will say, too, that the person who's chosen to be the scapegoat is typically the empath, the highly
Mm.
sensitive person, the
Mm.
truth teller, the one who's not afraid to call out what's happening in the family dynamic. So
Mm.
it's targeted. And sometimes it's deliberate and conscious, and sometimes it's not conscious. The family can be in a state of denial in terms of the dysfunction and
Mhm.
not be fully conscious of what they're doing and how they're behaving. So that
Mm.
adds another layer. But the rejection, I think, is, at least for me, has been the hardest part. There is something called family mobbing. Have you heard that term before?
No,
No?
what's family mobbing?
So, family mobbing, it's no picnic, let me just say that.
Mhm.
It's when the dysfunctional family unit gangs up against the chosen scapegoat.
Hmm.
So, for example, if something goes wrong in the family, the scapegoat person who is blamed for
Mhm.
that issue or event, everybody comes together. And it's the narcissist at the head of those events that
Mhm.
rallies the siblings, for example,
Mm.
and pits the group against the scapegoat. So it creates this really isolating, lonely, dark sensation for the scapegoat that's very confusing, and it takes time to figure this out. And so, again,
Mm.
I'm really glad you're doing this episode because there isn't enough content out there on this topic, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Being a scapegoat, it took a while for me to figure it out. I'm only
Mhm.
5 years into my healing, and I'm still at the beginning in many ways to recover from this dynamic because there's so much isolation that comes out of the family mobbing. You don't have any allies. Your siblings become your enemies on
Mm.
purpose. And so, where do you go? And when you go to someone in the family, you're typically being gaslighted with your concerns. That's not what they said. I didn't say that. That's not true. You're making things
Mm.
up. You are too dramatic. Why are you so sensitive? These are clues for anyone listening. If you've been told those things in your family dynamic, chances are you are probably the scapegoat in the family.
So when you're
Yeah,
being told those things that, "Oh, well, no, you're misremembering, you're being too
right.
sensitive."
Yeah.
Are the other family members that are participating in it, is this something that they're consciously doing? Is trying to blame and shame, or how does that show up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's yes and no. I think
Mm.
that when this dysfunction starts early on, when the kids are really young,
Mm.
I think as a safety and coping mechanism, the siblings will side with the parent because it's safer. If you
Mm.
side with the scapegoat, you could be scapegoated too, and nobody wants to be scapegoated. So I think it's a little bit of both. And a lot of us are in this denial state where we just don't see things the way they really are.
Mhm.
So we come up with coping mechanisms and catchphrases that minimize the situation and
Mhm.
deflect so
Hmm.
that we don't have to really dig in and do the work and confront the pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's fascinating because as you describe it that way, it has me thinking that, yes, I can see how this could be, with a narcissistic parent, but also it sounds like a significant amount of emotional immaturity. And as you talk
Yes.
about how it's usually the highly sensitive and the empathic people that
Yeah.
are scapegoated, I almost wonder if it's because they're more aware of emotions and aware of everybody else's emotions, and maybe those that are less emotionally mature, it's always easier to blame somebody else than to take
Yeah.
accountability, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, always. Yes,
Yeah.
always. And I wanna say too that the scapegoat role can rotate in the family. So, the golden child could become the scapegoat and vice versa. So, I've been in both roles. This
How confusing. Can you tell
very
more about that? So
yes.
first describe the golden child and the scapegoat and what are the differences in those roles. But
Yeah,
then I really want to hear how they can switch. That's
yeah,
fascinating.
how they're reassigned. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. So, the golden child is the one who is more enmeshed with
Mhm.
the narcissistic. I'm gonna use the narcissistic dynamic in this
Mhm.
explanation because while you can be scapegoated in a dysfunctional family that doesn't have the narcissistic element,
Mhm.
it's more common in my experience to have both the
Hmm.
narcissism and the dysfunction. So
Mhm.
the narcissist also assigns the golden child,
Hmm.
the one who's gonna be more compliant, who's more like them, who's not going
Hmm.
to resist the programming, as I call it.
Mhm.
And it's a very unhealthy dynamic, and it can turn into such enmeshment that I've heard it called emotional incest, which
Hmm.
is a big phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but let's say the scapegoat does something wonderful and gets more attention for any length of time. They can be
Mhm.
sort of reassigned as the golden child in that moment. And then someone else has to become the scapegoat. They have to have a scapegoat in the system.
Hmm.
So those two roles can switch. In my experience, it was temporary. So back to the scapegoat role, I
Mhm.
went. And because of my personality, I'm sensitive, but I'm also very vocal and
Mhm.
a truth teller, and I call it the way I see it, and that rocks the boat. So,
Yeah.
hence the family mobbing. Also, the silent treatment is another. dynamic in this dysfunction where if you do something that they think is wrong or not in compliance with the family dysfunctional rules,
Mhm.
then you can be given the silent treatment and stonewalled, which furthers the isolation and rejection emotions in the scapegoat and can later show up, as in my case, as complex PTSD.
Hmm.
It's unresolved, unprocessed trauma and emotions, and they show up. We filter every experience through all of our past experiences.
Right.
So, yeah, so the way I figured this out, it was just before the pandemic, and I talk about this in my first episode that will launch in October. I'm so excited.
Mhm.
Someone I was working with suggested that I look at my patterns and behaviors, and I said, "Why? Why? What's wrong with my patterns?" And he said, "Well, I hear your stories, and I feel like the patterns that you've developed that you're not really aware of are coping mechanisms, and you're
Mm.
filtering life through them. So let's say you get an opportunity in your career, and in that opportunity, in that experience, something triggers inside of you,
Mhm.
and you're operating with your behavior through that trigger, and it ruins the opportunity because you're reading it wrong."
Hmm.
So, yeah, so I would that was when I was like, "Okay," and a few other things took place, and I thought, "He's right. I need to look at my patterns." And that's one of the
Mhm.
tips that I wanna give at the end when we talk about tips and resources, because
Yeah.
if you can and people pleasing too,
Mhm.
is a big pattern of being scapegoated.
I'm also really curious, like, I found it so interesting as you talked about how you could switch back and forth and how you personally that was your experience between
Yeah.
being scapegoated and being the golden child.
Mhm.
And number 1, how disorienting, but also the sporadic reinforcement of
Mhm.
hoping to be the golden child and thinking, "Well,
Mm.
if I can just do the right thing," I can totally see how that would lead into those people-pleasing tendencies,
Yes.
because you want to not be scapegoated anymore, you want to be the golden child, you want to be the special one, but
Yeah.
knowing that you're gonna get knocked off of that role at any moment, that
Mhm.
must be extremely upsetting to the nervous system, and speaking to that, I'm wondering if you can share with us some of the signs and symptoms of being scapegoated. You said some of
Right.
the signs and symptoms are it's always your fault, like you
Yep.
joked about that 9/11 was your fault. So even
Right.
things not related to you at all, you kind of just knew it was always going to be your fault.
Right.
Silent treatment,
Mhm.
stonewalling. What are some of the other symptoms and signs of scapegoating?
In terms of trying to figure out if you've been scapegoated in your family?
Yeah, I guess I'm really
Yeah.
curious, like, how did you put it together? Like, what brought it into your awareness? It sounds like it's something that it's often hard to see that you're experiencing it, so how did you
Right.
figure it out?
So there were 2 other events that took place in terms of identifying my own behaviors, and some of
Mhm.
that included anxiety and people pleasing,
Hmm.
and when my friend suggested that I start looking at my patterns, I went to YouTube and I
Mhm.
started looking up as many videos and books that I could find on the subject of narcissism, family dysfunction, and all of those things. And that's when I started to identify with, oh, silent treatment. Gaslighting. There's a whole list of nomenclature is a term I use. Like it's the vocabulary for this. So I
Mhm.
started looking into all of those different elements in that dysfunction and first
Hmm.
identified with the experiences that I had under that lens. And then just looking for information. And when I finally got to the point where found what I was looking for, it was about 2 or 3 years in from that first event, and
Mhm.
I was on during the pandemic when we all had a lot of time. I was on a Facebook group page about narcissism, I'm sure, and I was
Mhm.
reading comments, and in the comments, someone suggested a book
Mhm.
that was written by Rebecca C. Mandeville. This is one of my tips at the end for references and
Yeah.
resources. I wanna get the name of the book right, so I have to look it up. Blamed, Shamed, and Rejected. blamed, and shamed. I sometimes get those backwards. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's just
Uh,
fine, and I'll link that in the show notes for everybody
yeah,
too.
rejected,
Um
shamed, and blamed. Yes. So she wrote this book. She is a licensed family therapist
Mhm.
and a life coach, and she wrote this book that described my entire experience
Wow.
on family scapegoating. She's coined the term family scapegoating abuse and has
Mhm.
a peer review study out and another one in the making, which is
Mhm.
important because that gives this dynamic more exposure and more
Mhm.
people with opportunities to learn about what they might have been through. Because for me, it was, I just walked around with a chip on my shoulder and this anxiety thinking, oh, this is just who I am.
Mm.
No, it was my programming and my conditioning and my upbringing. So once I got the vocabulary down, I knew what to look for, not just in information, but also my behaviors and my patterns. So I could start to break those cycles within my own
Yeah.
family. Yeah. Did that
Oh,
answer your
interesting.
question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that does answer my
Okay,
question
good.
beautifully. And I'm also curious, I'm going back again to the switching back and forth between the scapegoat and the golden child.
Yeah.
From your experience, was that often like, I wonder if that was even weaponized, like comparison with why can't you be like them? Is that another symptom of being scapegoated, or what was your experience there?
It can be. Yes. It wasn't my experience.
Mhm.
I will say,
Mhm.
though, that especially in the narcissistic dynamic, the narcissist is very interested in and protective of image, the family image.
Mm.
And I thought about this earlier today in anticipation of meeting with you. And I feel like
Mhm.
in my upbringing, there was a lot of lack financially.
Mhm.
So maybe that's why I didn't experience it. And I feel like families that are more affluent might have more to be concerned about in terms of image. So,
Interesting.
yeah, that was my take earlier today. When I
Mhm.
thought about it, we didn't have a lot to be concerned about in terms of
Yeah.
public facing personas. So no, and when the roles switched, it wasn't necessarily scapegoat to golden child and back. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's the scapegoat to the lost child, which is another
Hmm.
element. Gets If the scapegoat leaves
Mhm.
and goes no contact, that's a term that's really popular right now,
Mhm.
um, someone else has to take that role on.
Hmm.
So it can be reassigned in that way to another sibling. And it's not typically the golden child in my experience, it's the lost child or someone else in the system that's not already been the golden child, because that rearing, from my experience, started at a very young age. The golden child is conditioned and programmed from a very, very young age. And I see it more with a mother and son
Mhm.
than a mother and daughter dynamic in terms of the golden child. So,
Interesting.
mhm, yeah.
And can you kind of give us a little bit more information about who is the lost child? Like, how would you describe the lost child?
It's in my experience, it's someone who's been sort of ignored in the sense that they weren't given opportunities that other kids are in that system. Maybe they didn't excel in school as much, so they just kinda get washed into the background,
Okay.
and not given what definitely not what they needed, for sure. So they just kind of become quiet and voiceless in my experience. Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
so tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. So
Mhm.
then both the golden child and the scapegoat are getting a lot of attention, though different kinds of attention.
Yes,
And then the lost child is the one that's kind of ignored and neglected. And then those roles
right.
kind of can rotate and shift around depending on
Mhm.
what is going to put forth the best image in the moment, it
Right,
sounds like.
and
Okay.
protect the denial system that is such
Mhm.
has such a stronghold on especially the dysfunctional families, and what I mean by dysfunction is unresolved trauma of their own. It can be alcoholism, drug addiction, all of those things are under that dysfunctional umbrella when I say
Hmm.
dysfunctional. Yeah. So there's a lot of, I think, in every role, including the narcissist and maybe especially a lot of unprocessed trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
There are a couple of other things that I have in my notes that, in terms of people trying to identify whether they've been scapegoated, that I think are important. If I can just take a quick glance here. Okay, so here are a few things that are really common that a family scapegoat can experience. They're,
Mhm.
like I said earlier, they're blamed for everything. When
Mhm.
anything goes wrong, it's their fault. Ironically, your successes are minimized.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're ignored or downplayed. They don't want to put you on a pedestal. That role is taken in this
Hmm.
movie, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say too that, once you start to identify the theatrics, for lack of better
Mhm.
term, in the behaviors from the dysfunctional family members onto the scapegoat, you'll stop buying tickets to the show. Once you see the performative and the cosmetics of it. So being criticized is another, sort of backhanded way of keeping you in your place, so to speak. And the same rules don't apply to every family member.
Mhm.
So the golden child gets special treatment, the scapegoat gets the silent treatment. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're kind of a
That's
dumping
so
ground.
interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
and because as you list off those things, so just to kind of recap those qualities that you shared, it has me thinking that we've been talking about this in the family dynamic, but
Mhm.
really these symptoms you can also see in individual relationships, the
True.
blame, the shame, successes are minimized.
Yep.
You're maybe ignored, you're downplayed, backhanded criticism. They're holding other people to a different standard than they're holding you to, that they don't wanna put you back on they don't wanna put you on a pedestal because you don't belong there, so they have to knock you down.
Yep.
And I love how you said that once you identify the theatrics, then you'll stop buying tickets to the show. And I
Mhm.
think that's where, like, the people pleasing comes in, is we keep thinking,
Yeah.
"If I can be good enough, then they'll treat me well."
The good one. We wanna be
Yeah.
perceived as a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about control, really,
Mhm.
and not in an evil control freak kind of way, but you
Mhm.
are manipulating the situation to protect yourself. It's a
Yeah.
coping and protective mechanism that can be learned, can be inherited,
Mhm.
and, you know, we wanna feel safe, so if the person we're having this relationship with makes us feel unsafe, we have to create circumstances,
Mhm.
imaginary or otherwise, that
Yeah.
allow us to feel safe so we can continue to function, really,
Hmm.
and protect your nervous system as well. Because sometimes it's hard to confront that someone who you have loved for so long and is supposed to give that back to you
Mhm.
it is not working in your best interest. They're
Yeah.
manipulating you, and it makes
Mhm.
us shrink, and then so we think, "Oh, how do we get out of this smallness?" Well, I'll just
Mm.
buy more things for them. I'll do more things for them. And it's just a spiral. And so once you start to recognize the patterns, this is one of the things that I want to suggest.
Mhm.
Look at your patterns. Look at how many times you apologize for things that you know aren't your fault, or watch the behavior of other people when you go to lunch with friends or when you're at work. Just notice how people behave. You don't have to tell them you're surveying them, but,
Mhm.
just look at how many times they apologize, or do they have patterns in them that you're recognizing in yourself as a way to
Mhm.
get some sort of like reverse engineer mirroring? Because I think watching other people's behaviors can be really informative for our own.
Tell me more about that. How has observing other people helped you? Because that's interesting, because there is that
Yeah.
self-reflective piece, but
Yeah.
when you are observing other people, what else are you observing besides how often they're apologizing compared to you? Like, what are the other things that kind of struck you as, "Oh, that's different?"
Yeah, so some things that may not relate to family scapegoating specifically, but just
Mhm.
thinking about some of my friends who do over apologize. There's also
Mhm.
overgiving. That's a behavior that I've noticed in others and myself. That's part
Mhm.
of the people pleasing dynamic. If I give enough, I'll be considered the good one and I won't be attacked today and I can get through work at least. Some of the other behaviors that I have noticed in people is the denial behavior. I've had conversations with friends where, they're in bad relationships, and I'll gently say, "Oh, I think, have you looked at this?" "No, no, 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 no." They minimize the issues.
Mm.
That's another behavior pattern that I've noticed. And it's not that I think it's more that they're protecting their own nervous system. Because
Yeah.
if we pull the curtain all the way back at once, it's too much. That's what I did. When I first started to figure this out, MaryAnn, I thought I could YouTube my way out of this problem in 6 months. No,
Yeah.
it's deeper than that. There's so many layers. Yeah, those are just a few of the behaviors, and it's interesting to watch even films. Ask yourself, how are these characters behaving in this film? Am I like them? Do I wanna be more like them? Do I wanna have less of those behaviors? Films are a
Mm.
really good way to learn about behaviors, especially specific films that are geared toward trauma. There's actually a film that I wanna recommend at the end. I'm gonna save it for the end.
Okay.
Don't let me forget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and that's so interesting because I like say how you said to watch films because I do know specifically people in narcissistic relationships,
Mhm.
they have a very easy time identifying who's the narcissist.
Right.
But to zoom out a little and
Mhm.
see if you can identify, okay, who's the golden child? Who's the scapegoat?
Yeah.
Who's the lost child? To see if you can identify those other roles once you've identified that, okay, this is a familiar thing instead of it's our tendency to just focus on the other person, right? But I like how you said, okay, well, look for how it's showing up in other roles so that you can identify those parts of self,
Yeah.
I think could be very helpful.
And I think it's easier too than sitting down and dissecting your own personality.
Yeah.
So for me, when I started to figure out the people-pleasing dynamic in myself, going through all these videos and learning the vocabulary, the nomenclature, I thought,
Mhm.
"Oh, yes, I do that and that." And I kept coming back to people-pleasing, and it took me a couple of years to really dismantle that part of my personality
Mm.
because it had become such a protective energy in my family dynamic, and being an empath and a highly sensitive person, I feel tomorrow's feelings. On
Yeah.
if we feel everything. But it's a tough role, and, the people pleasing for me was the biggest pattern that I really
Mm.
started to dismantle and rebuild, and so I had to ask myself often, "Am I really that nice? May
Hmm.
Am I really that kind? Am I really that generous?" And I have always, and I still, because I am a generous person, I finally figured it out. Yes, I am kind. I'm not
Mhm.
evil. I am not what they said I was. So there's this
Yeah.
identity crisis, I think, that
Hmm.
happens in the scapegoat role. I'm actually working on a course about rebuilding or healing the identity wound and rebuilding a new identity
Mhm.
without the dysfunction, because we don't know who we are outside of the dysfunction until we start to rebuild that. So, people pleasing for me was the first pattern to go. And I still to this day want to help people. If I see someone stranded on the side of the road, my impulse says, pull over. And then
Yeah.
my safety voice says, what are you thinking? And
Yeah.
then I have to remember, oh, that might be a people pleasing energy that is coming up from my past, but now I can stop it and not overgive, which is a huge part of my people pleasing problem. And then I give so much and then I don't get anything back and then I'm upset. I'm like, but you're supposed to reciprocate. I'm supposed to not give so much. That's really the dynamic. I
Yeah.
You don't give as much. And it's hard for someone who's been a people pleaser for a long time to suddenly stop pleasing.
For sure, and to
Yeah.
untangle that of trying
Yeah.
to think through because it's when love has been conditional for so long,
Mhm.
it's easy to think, "Okay, well, now that I've broken free, now that I
Right.
see it, now I can have this," and then still trying to figure out, "Okay, well, what does it look like to create balance?" Because, like you said, sometimes we are overgiving, thinking that then they'll see our value and come to us, but
Mhm.
then we end up burned out and resentful and like, "Okay, well, maybe I need to pull back a little so I can have the opportunity, and maybe they will and maybe they won't," and
Right.
But it is interesting, and then especially, like you said, when you're going through that identity crisis, that
Yes.
just adds another layer where it's like, "Well, I don't quite know who I am. Am I a nice person?"
Yeah.
I think that that's gonna be really impactful for a lot of people, because I know
Yeah.
a lot of the people pleasers I've worked with, they think, "Well, if I'm not a people pleaser, I'm gonna be mean." It's like,
Right.
"No, you're not a mean
Right.
person.
Right.
You're just not going to over accommodate anymore. You're going to make sure that your own cup is filled and you're not mean and you're not evil. You're not the things that they've told you that you are,
Right.
but allowing that identity to shed so that you can live more authentically."
And you said something really beautiful in a podcast that I watched this week on the fear of abandonment.
Hmm.
That's true for both scapegoats and others who have people-pleasing tendencies, but weren't scapegoated.
Hmm.
It
Yep.
it can be on both sides. The fear of rejection, abandonment, loss, that's where that all comes from. And
Yeah.
yeah, it
And
does.
just to recap that yeah,
Mhm.
that having that fear of abandonment leads to that self-abandonment, which I think is what you were just
Mhm.
describing, is
Yes.
I don't know who I am anymore
Mhm,
because I've abandoned myself in an effort to please,
mhm.
and we're
And
so scared
survive.
of losing people that
And
yeah, that we
survive.
abandon ourselves.
Yeah, that is so well said. We really do. And then we're lost and confused and
Yeah.
depressed and not functioning at our full capacity. So,
Yeah.
it does take some, like you said earlier, some untangling,
Mhm.
and, the biggest thing I want everyone listening to take away from this, especially if you're just figuring out, "Uh-oh, she said something that makes me possibly be the scapegoat." Just take your healing really slowly and be intentional about your healing. Don't do what I did during the pandemic and overconsume to the point of panic attacks and mass confusion. Like,
Mhm.
and find community and support that is rooted in scapegoating or people pleasing, because
Mhm.
they can be different. And I do want to talk about the difference a little bit of people pleasing versus codependency. Is this
Mhm.
something that you've explored on your show?
I don't know if I've, said it explicitly, so yeah, share more about that.
Okay. Let me find my notes, because scapegoating and people pleasing, they go together, but I don't
Mm,
think that everyone who's a people pleaser has been scapegoated. People pleasing, like we said, it comes out of the fear of abandonment and wanting
mhm.
to protect and not lose and keep the status quo and keep the peace. With codependency, it's more of a survival technique where I've got to find this note because I wrote this out and it was so perfect. The codependent person is enmeshed with the narcissist
Mm,
to the point where, especially with the golden child, there
mhm.
is a lack of individuality.
Mm,
They're so enmeshed, they're kind of one person. And so it's sort of like codependency is like people pleasing on steroids.
mhm.
You're super enmeshed. It's a survival mechanism rather than seeking approval. That's one of the
Mm,
big differences, if that makes
mm.
sense. And I know you talk about people pleasing a lot on your show.
Yeah.
That's a main focus, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And have you come across any scapegoat people in your practice so far? Is this newer to your ears?
Well, it's interesting because was getting requests on YouTube to talk
Okay.
about this, and that was right when I met you.
Mhm.
And so it has been interesting to see how it's showing up. But to be able to put words on the experience, as you've talked about it, I can see more. Okay, I can see that many of my clients are going to fit into this role. But it's very interesting to actually put a name on it, I think can help
Right.
to bring so much clarity. And it helps you to feel not as alone. When you've talked about
Yeah.
the isolation that can come with it, just
Mhm.
putting a word on it can help you to feel not so alone and not so crazy
Yeah.
that, well, what's wrong with me? Something must be wrong with me because they've always been telling you that something's wrong with you, right? So it's
Right.
easy to believe that. But to give it a name and see, oh, it's not me? Really? I think
Right.
it's just so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that oh, go ahead.
No, 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 you're good. You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say, I think that we've teased them enough, and I would love to get a list of your resources and
Sure.
what supports. Now that they're probably identifying that, oh, that might be me.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what supports you have found helpful.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the book by Rebecca, Rejected,
Mhm.
Shamed, and Blamed. There's an Audible version as well and
Mhm.
a hard copy, Amazon, wherever you get your books. I
Mhm.
highly recommend that. She's also got a pretty strong presence on Substack, if you're
Okay.
familiar with that. And that book alone has done more for me than any other research that I've done,
Mhm.
including all of the YouTube videos that I've watched.
Mhm.
There aren't a lot specifically on the scapegoat role, and the same for podcasts. There just aren't
Yeah.
many out there, unfortunately. The film I want to suggest is a documentary by Gabor Mate. I know I mentioned him the
Mhm.
first time we met. Let me get the titles so I don't mess it up. He's also what I consider, this is my own term, sort of the godfather of trauma.
Mm.
And he has a number of books out. And this movie I watched sometime during the pandemic. It's called The Wisdom of Trauma.
The wisdom of trauma.
Uh-huh.
Fascinating.
It
Okay.
is. Yeah, it was for me, it was sort of at the peak of increasing my compassion
Hmm.
for those who had scapegoated me in my family, which is a tough
Hmm.
one. And we can call it forgiveness or compassion, radical acceptance, but that comes later. Like, first step, identify your patterns, your behaviors. Make sure that, you were the family scapegoat by that checklist that we went through, and do your own
Mhm.
research. There's another film, and it's not necessarily on scapegoating.
Mhm.
It was done by a group of people in the UK, and if I can't find it real quick, I will send it to you so you can include it in the show notes.
Okay.
Um, it was more about narcissism, and
Mhm.
it's on YouTube, that's what it is. I think it was free. The Gabor Mate film was a donation-based watch, so, yeah, I'm not finding it, but I will find it, and I will send it to you. For those who
Okay.
are interested in learning about the relationship, it's not a family dynamic, it was about 2 people dating, and
Mhm.
it was really eye-opening because, like I
Mhm.
said, scapegoating can come with narcissism or without it. So it's
Yeah.
important to understand both and take your healing slowly. I have a couple of other tips that I think would help listeners. Look at your patterns, take your healing slowly, and start to think about your identity, because this really is an identity crisis in the middle of it. There's a lot of chaos and confusion that goes with this role. But once you start to figure out your own patterns, then you can start to rebuild your future based on healthier patterns
Yeah.
that create a life that is more enjoyable, that invites less narcissism and scapegoating, because that can happen in any dynamic in any group. And
Yeah.
we talked about this earlier. People pleasers tend to be a little bit more vulnerable and open and generous. So we can be targets for that kind of
Yeah.
energy. Yeah. Hmm.
And I can see how just taking that time to even think about your own identity and how do I see myself could be so helpful
Yeah.
when you're being told that you're something else. And of course, that's going to create an identity crisis because it's kind of gaslighting, right? Saying, no, you're this horrible being. It's like, wait, what? Who am I? What? Did I say that? Did I do that? So
Yeah.
I love those tips. So you said first, identify your patterns and behaviors.
Yep.
Second, take your healing slowly.
Hmm.
And third, start to think about your personal identity to help to untangle all of that.
Yeah. And a quote, I tried to find where this came from. I've seen it a number of times, but has stuck, and I can't find the original author, but it's stuck with me for years. And that is
Mhm.
to be careful of what you tolerate, because you are teaching people how to treat you.
So good.
Boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And noticing your own patterns will help you identify, oh, this person's giving me breadcrumbs.
Mhm.
What am I doing to allow that? I want the whole loaf. I don't want
Mhm.
just the crumbs. I deserve more. But first is the awakening. You have to figure out what your behavior patterns are and just be really easy on yourself. Just take your time, take it as slow as you can. Be intentional with your healing, because don't do what I did, overconsume and like the doom scrolling and then get
Mhm.
stuck on a new influencer on TikTok or whatever that's giving you new information about the narcissism in your family. Like maybe
Mhm.
schedule your intake, the
Mhm.
consumption of the information so that you're rested and fed and feeling good and you're of sound mind when you're learning about it so that you
Mhm.
don't get really reactive and over emotional and go into a spiral like I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such good advice. Yeah, so what words of encouragement do you have for those that are at the beginning of this journey?
I would say you were never the problem.
Mm.
It's not your fault. You have hidden talents and parts of you that you've yet to discover that are buried under this identity that you have been given, that's been forced upon you, and that you've adopted out of necessity, out of
Mhm.
survival. And just recognize that some of that's in the past now, hopefully, most of it, and that there is a way out and that you can heal from this, but be careful with your overconsumption and find community that understand this dynamic, that can support
Mhm.
you and listen to your story so you can feel seen and heard and validated and be a contributing member of society rather than reclusive in your home in the pantry, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is beautiful. Elle, thank you so
Yay.
much for being here. This
Oh,
has
thank
been such an
you.
amazing conversation.
Likewise.
And
Thank you.
tell everybody again, where can they find you? Tell them the name of your podcast. I'm going to make sure that this drops about the same time so they can jump over and follow you and subscribe.
Oh,
Because, like
thank
you said,
you.
there's so few resources for
True.
those that have been scapegoated.
Right.
And I think that your channel is going to be an extremely valuable resource. So tell us
Thank
more about how
you.
they can find you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm also on Substack. I don't engage quite as much as I will after the launch, and both that and the podcast can be found. There is a trailer out right now, I will say, not on Apple because strategically
Hmm.
I want to get as many reviews to get us into a higher ranking so we have more visibility and can reach more people. But
Hmm.
once that launches, it will go straight to Apple, and it's called the Family Scapegoat Chronicles. And if anyone listening is uh, unfortunately the scapegoat in your family and you want to come on the show, that's going to be a huge part of the format where we
Hmm.
interview either anonymously or like this on
Yeah.
camera where people can come and share their story in a safe space and find community.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful because I'm sure
Yeah.
that finding your voice and giving voice to the ways that you've been wronged can just be so healing for people. And not only that, but hearing those
Yeah.
stories and knowing you're not alone.
Yep.
I think that's just gonna be beautiful.
Yeah. And critical, I think, for healing as well. And hopefully
Yeah.
I can be a part of that for many people because already I have like 12 or 13 different countries that have listened to the trailer. So it's a
Yeah.
global issue. It's not, just one or two families. It's a thing. So I'm so grateful that you invited me here today because we're just getting started and you're kicking it off. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for all of the healing that you're bringing into the world. It's beautiful to witness.
Thank you. Likewise. I love your show. I love your
Okay.
show. I can't wait to dig in more. So,
Oh, good.
uh,
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad
yes,
that we were able to connect.
yes. And maybe you can come on our show and share
I would love to.
your story and expertise. I think that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And as a reminder, you can find all of the resources that Elle talked about here on the show. I will link all of them in the show notes so that you can find support, community, and healing. So thank you so much, and I'll see you
Yeah.
next week.
Thank you. Take care. Bye, everyone.